One of the many strengths of Dark Souls is the sheer number of viable weapons, armor, and spell combinations. Due to the game's overwhelming possibilities and the difficulty of the game, it can be easy to find a workable build or a favorite weapon and exclusively play that style. After all, it's the one you learned or later mastered the game with. Many new Dark Souls players might not know which stats to prioritize when, or what their build will look like later, leading to a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none build that they'll either suffer through or inevitably restart with the knowledge they've gained. This build guide will be focused on helping new players figure out how important each stat is, what they do, what the soft and hard caps are, but also for veteran players who find themselves pigeonholed with the same build over and over again by providing more creative examples than a pure strength, dexterity, faith, intelligence, or pyromancy build. As someone with a few hundred hours in the first Dark Souls across multiple platforms, I find myself in the latter camp. The idea of doing a build guide seemed like a chore, but it's actually renewed my love for the game, forced me to use weapons, spells, and armor I wouldn't normally use, and has made me hungry for more unique, creative builds. If you're a new player trying to crack the Dark Souls code, or a veteran player looking for inspiration to refresh a game mired with possibility, welcome to the couch. The key to any specific build, and especially to coming up with your own build, is to understand what each stat does, how important it is when, and what the soft and hard caps are. Soft caps are one or more points at which a stat will have diminishing returns, or less of a benefit per point than each point previously given. The hard cap is the point at which a stat will provide no further benefit, or so little as to be considered no benefit. Each of these kinds of caps will be the driving force behind how long and when each stat will be prioritized. Vitality in Dark Souls 1 is the measure of the amount of health the character has. New players will and should prioritize this more than veteran players, since the idea you never need more vitality if you never get hit, despite being somewhat of a joke, is very achievable for a long time if you are familiar with the environment and enemy attack patterns. Vitality provides a mostly steady gain of health per point up until the mid-40s. After 50, the gain drops significantly until the max of 99. Because you technically will continue to gain benefit from Vitality until 99, there is no hard cap, and the soft cap is somewhat fluid, but definitely not after 50. Vitality should be prioritized somewhere in the middle. A few points should be dropped every once in a while, but if you can afford to dump a level in another stat and feel comfortable with your health, it can be ignored until later. Attunement determines the amount of attunement slots a character will have for assigning sorceries, miracles, and pyromancies. You'll get no benefit from attunement until 10, which most classes will start either close to or past 10. This stat will provide one slot for every 2 points until 16, with each subsequent slot being awarded after 3 points, then 4 points, and so on until 50, after which there is absolutely no benefit, bringing the total number of slots to 10, or by using rings to increase them up to 12. Most characters, especially if they are a mixture of spellcaster and weapon user, will probably not need that many slots, and 16 for an attunement stat will be comfortable for quite a while. Remember that with more spells assigned, it can be difficult to switch to the one you need in the middle of a fight. Sometimes less is more. Attunement is another stat that will vary widely between players, and its usefulness can be limited early by the available spells. The soft cap is again somewhat fluid here, but should be determined by how many useful or unique spells a player feels that they need. The hard cap, by definition, is 50, since after this point there is absolutely no benefit. Now we're getting into some real meat. Endurance is, in my opinion, the most important stat to level as many times as you can, as early as you can. Endurance will determine two things. One, your equipment load, and thus which role you have, but more importantly, your stamina. The equipment load will go up by 1 for every point put into endurance, allowing you to equip heavier armor or weapons while providing better rolls at less than 75%, 50%, with the best at less than 25%. Some builds that use heavy armor, great shields, and massive weapons may be impossible to achieve anything less than the worst roll or fat roll, but while creating a build, you must determine the balance between the level of roll, the provided defense, and how much damage the character can take before staggering, called poise. But the real reason endurance is so important is because it increases your stamina. Stamina determines how long you can sprint, how many times you can roll, how many times you can swing your weapon, and how many times your character can block an attack. For every build, but especially melee builds or builds using shields, having as much endurance as possible is paramount. It can allow the character to block an attack and punish, attack after dodging, save a roll after a combo, etc. For new Dark Souls players, this stat may get overlooked, but one of the keys to mastering and feeling comfortable with Dark Souls is conscious stamina management during fights. Characters will gain stamina up until endurance reaches 40, after which the only benefit will be to equipment load. The extra points to equipment load is essentially useless, thus the hard cap for endurance for any build should be considered 40. Strength and dexterity can be treated as essentially identical for different weapons, with dexterity being also somewhat useful for spellcasters. The two roles that each stat plays is determining the melee damage of weapons and, more importantly, weapon requirements. While points into these stats may be tempting, it is more efficient to upgrade the weapons instead, saving leveling up for other stats, especially endurance. Only once weapons are fully upgraded, or once other stats feel sufficient, should points be put into strength and dexterity for increased damage output. The most important role these stats have, therefore, is weapon requirements. The amount of points in strength and dexterity should not exceed the necessary points to wield whatever shield, wand, talisman, or weapon for the build. If intending to wield large weapons with high strength requirements, two-handing weapons will satisfy requirements 50% higher than your character's strength stat would allow. For example, the Black Knight Greatsword requires a strength of 32, but could be wielded two-handed at as low as 22, since 50% extra would be functionally 33. Dexterity at high levels, from 35 to 45, will increase the casting speed of miracles, sorceries, and pyromancies, making a dexterous spellcaster build extremely viable to maximize stat usefulness. Dark Souls veterans should know that resistance is essentially useless for all builds, but increases defense and poison resistance. Resistance can sound very attractive for new players who are taking a beating or are sick of dealing with the poison in Blighttown, but there are other effective methods for dealing with both. For damage, you would be better served putting points into either Vitality for more health, or Endurance for more equipment load to equip better armor. For poison, you can either equip armor with higher poison resistance, or just kinda deal with the poison for the duration that you're in Blighttown. In the same vein as don't get hit, you don't need health, if you can avoid getting poisoned or heal it immediately, you don't really need poison resistance. If you're a new player struggling with the Blighttown Swamp, just remember that the bonfire at the bottom will not only fill your Estus flasks, but also heals poison while you get your bearings straight until you're ready to take on the boss. Resistance should pretty much be ignored. No build is made better for it, and there are better ways of achieving what it can provide. Much like strength and dexterity, intelligence and faith are two sides of the same coin, for sorceries and miracles respectively. Intelligence will determine which sorceries can be used and the damage they deal. Faith determines which miracles are available and their effectiveness. Catalysts, talismans, and some weapons will also use these stats for their weapon requirements. Also, like strength and dexterity, these should be raised appropriately to use the intended spells, and may be prioritized even more than endurance if spellcasting is the primary damage dealer of that build, since casting spells requires no stamina. And that's everything about the stats in Dark Souls. Hopefully with this knowledge, you'll be able to make more educated decisions about point distributions for specific Dark Souls builds. Rather than use a pure build, we wanted to use a creative challenge as a specific example of a unique build. Link from the Legend of Zelda series. Dark Souls is clearly inspired by Ocarina of Time's revolutionary lock-on system, and can thus be played like a grittier, more hardcore Legend of Zelda title, sometimes similar to Breath of the Wild. As with any challenge, this build is about limiting your available toolset and trying to win from there. As such, which generation of this character you limit yourself to is up to you. While there is a wiki article outlining one specific Link build, it is up to the player to follow at their discretion. For example, maybe the Astora's Straight Sword looks more like the Master Sword than the wiki recommended Divine Broadsword. At the end of the day, challenges are meant to be fun, new, and engaging. The best class to start the Link challenge is the Hunter, due to stats and starting equipment, as the armor is most analogous to Link's tunic. One of the first weapons to get early is the dagger from the male undead merchant in Undeadburg, representing either the level 1 sword or the Kokiri sword according to the wiki, but depending on the restrictions you place for yourself, you may decide that any one-handed sword would suffice as a representative of Link's swords. The wooden shield, or Kokiri shield, can also be found just before the bonfire under the undead soldier with the crossbow. After the charging boar, a fitting enemy given the resemblance to Ganon, the knight shield can be picked up to act as Link's iconic Hylian shield. The other two shields the wiki recommends, the Blood Shield and Eagle Shield, can be found much later in the Painted World of Ariamis and the Scaffolding of Blighttown, respectively. The next important piece of equipment is the Claymore on the Undeadburg Bridge, representing the Begoron sword from Ocarina of Time. Once Andre is available, the broadsword is appropriate for all generations of Link, since it can only do slashes, even though later iterations of Link do gain the ability to stab. Again, the nature of the challenge is up to the discretion of each player. You can get a hammer early from killing Andre, but given his importance, it may be wise to wait until just before a new Game Plus cycle. Both the Megaton hammer and the Begoron sword must be two-handed. Link's trusty hat is the most difficult item to find something similar to, but I prefer the Sorcerer's Hat since it can be found early in Lower Undeadburg, and unlike the Tattered Hood or Brigand's Hood, it keeps Link's hair intact to better look the part. Tearstone rings can be used in place of the beeping noise typical of low health in a Zelda game, although the red Tearstone ring gives a more tangible benefit than the blue Tearstone ring by increasing attack strength, something not found in Zelda games. The spells are kind of all over the place, but some of the most recognizable ones will be Homeward, representing Farore's Wind of Ocarina of Time, Great Magic Barrier for Nehru's Love, Fire Orb for A Link to the Past's Fire Rod, and Crystal Soul Spear for the same game's Ice Rod. While spreading out attribute points between the spells and miracles Link can use might not be the most efficient, the point of this build is to roleplay with whatever tools a typical Zelda game may entail, not necessarily to be the most efficient. One aspect you can replicate too is only leveling up your vitality after boss fights, acting as if each half bar of health equals one heart container. If you do this, you'll technically start the game with more than 3 hearts. 3 levels of vitality is about 1/2 of a health bar. And there you have it, how to play Dark Souls as if it were a Legend of Zelda game. In future videos, we'll even talk about how to do a Zelda build and a Ganon or Ganondorf build, and what unique challenges they entail. Let us know in the comments any fun or unique builds that you've come up with. If you've made it this far, just wanted to say thanks. I'm Dylan, and if you thought this was useful, please give it a like. If you want to see more build guides or Dark Souls content from us in the future, hit that bell icon. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, we always got room for you on the couch.